It's horrifying when you look at the data.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. Welcome to Connect Africa. We are here again for another session with Kwame Gonda. Today's topic is very important. It will shed a light what is going on, the burden that this our continent is suffering from. So today's topic is, as you have seen, it's the date who owns, Kenya's debt, who owes Kenya's external debt. And with regards to that, in debunking American and Western lies, what are they saying to this? Now, Kwame, welcome indeed once again here to give. We can't wait for all the things that you are going to unfold to us today. Um, Welcome.
Thank you, Mahlet, and greetings to our viewers and supporters of Connect Africa. We really appreciate you. Yesterday we were here, we had a very hot topic, and even today we have brought to you a very, very hot topic that needs discussion. We need to continue to push the narrative, the African narrative, and that is why the channel is here. So you have to support the channel. Definitely, you have to support the channel. You have to share with others. And yesterday we noticed that we had a lot of viewers, but you did not like the video, because when you like the video, you give it a chance to be shown to others. You want this video to go out to all the other Africans. So this is very important. So if you have watched the video, 15,000 people, 5,000 people, you need to like the video so that the algorithm should not be able to suppress us. We will not find a way of suppressing us and suppressing our narrative, because if they suppress us, then they are suppressing your narrative as an African.
Yeah.
So you need to be part of this journey as we walk to make the African narrative a household narrative, a mainstream narrative. Africa's narrative should be mainstream, not only Western. So, and that is what this channel is about to do, or what we are trying to do. What we're going to do in the future, we're going to continue doing even in the future. So, be part of that channel,
Yeah.
be part of that channel, and let's do it. Let's do it together. Thank you
All
very
right.
much for being part of the channel.
Thank you. Thank you, Kwame. Indeed. So, as we have said, it is our topic is who owns Kenya's external debt. Now, intentions are always good. Why we are intended to do? Because now Kenya's protest, I mean, yesterday, as of 3rd of July, there was an article that was published in which, again, the US and its allies of organizations have shown their arrogance. But now the intention is that, as you have watched it, the Kenya protest is on the 16th day. It started on 18th June. We have seen the slogans transitioning from occupy the parliament, reject the finance bill, Ruto must go. Now they have found this is the root cause of the problem, which is the IMF and World Bank, that there's a lot has been paid from the Kenya's trade from Kenya to this gangster institutions. So now they have the slogan is now where it actually the Kenyans now would not get arrest unless these things are solved. So this article that was published, as it is the US government actually, which has the audacity to warn Kenyans, is saying that, I'm just gonna read the introduction part of the article. The US has warned that Kenya's rising debt burden is undermining its ability to provide quality medical care and education to its citizens, shining the spotlight on expensive debt procured in the last decade, partly from China. Reporters are now, this is Business Daily Africa. Of course, Business Daily Africa is taking it from the mainstream media. Now, they, as you can see, they have the nerves to say that. Now they are starting to position themselves towards towards the people. They are echoing the people now. They are trying to find so that they will not be kicked out. Now, before we jump to the questions, Kwame, I would like you, if you can just paint, so some things that we can understand how these debt firms are operating in Africa. Then I will go to the question.
Thank you very much, Mahlet. It is indeed very important to reflect on the reality, because the purpose of our channel, Connect Africa, and the founder, who is of course Mahlet, was to distinguish, separate facts from narrative. So you can have narrative, but those narratives lack in facts. Okay, we want to separate lies, narratives filled with lies, from facts. We want to separate those two. So that is what we are going to show you in this program today. So much has been said about African debt in the past, to the point that China has been implicated in burdening Africa with so much debt. And indeed, the recent demonstrations in Kenya have further highlighted the question of debt, because according to the protesters, what belongs to them is being used to pay the so-called debt of the IMF and World Bank, which is true, which is true. Now, their cries, of course, also highlight something that many, including Dr. Arikana Chiombori, who we know very well, a former African Union representative to the United States, and other players in the African financial space have said for so long. Africa and other global South countries have, been overburdened, not mainly with debt, but the interest rates that come with the debt that is given to them. And how is this done? Let's be honest, all countries borrow, but the difference is in the interest rate put on those loans. It turns out that according to the international financial arrangements, of course, the Bretton Woods institutions like the IMF and World Bank, poorer countries which are poorer, pay higher interest rates of up to 5 to 7% on loans borrowed. And the richer ones, the richer countries, pay only 1 to 3%. And this information, you can even find it. There's a couple of YouTubes in which Dr. Arikana was highlighting this problem. But Dr. Arikana and other players who brought it up, this debt issue, were not the first people, to highlight this problem. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, in his groundbreaking work, which is a classical work, Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, and specifically, if you read the chapter on the mechanisms of neocolonialism, he summarizes his book and he points out this problem of debt. And of course, I would recommend that book to every African, to read. While debt is an issue, Africa cannot be said to be, the worst, or with the one having the biggest debt burden, compared to countries like the United States and Japan, whose debt burden exceed even 100% of their GDP. If you look at Africa, your typical African country has a debt to GDP percentage of 50 to 65%. In fact, to be more precise, Africa's debt to GDP, overall debt to GDP, is 63.5%. But Africa's external debt to GDP is just 22%, 22.5 to be precise. So this goes to show you that Africa is not the most indebted, country or continent on earth, all African countries are not the most indebted countries on the planet Earth. On the other hand, the debt to GDP of the United States, the debt to GDP ratio of the United States is 123%. 123%. So figures are out there in the open. Even when you Google them, you can get them. The United States, its debt to GDP ratio is 123%, up to $33 trillion in debt for a country of $25 trillion of GDP. The US, the United States, is indeed indebted to China to the tune of almost $1 trillion, a country which the United States deceitfully and erroneously says is burdening Africa with debt. While Africa should pay attention to its debt burden, this situation has been rather exacerbated by comments and dogged lies from the United States and Western countries. There are institutions like the media, politicians, intellectuals, and others who blatantly, for selfish interests of their countries, seek to perpetually use Africa as a stepping stone to their greatness and to continue staying there in the same way. Recently, an article which Mahlet has already spoken about here appeared, in which the United States chose to deliberately, in its disinformation and misinformation campaign, to not only mislead the world by also pointing to Kenya's debt as a cause of concern. Now, this follows demonstrations which we have already said of the Kenyan youth who are frustrated by their president, who wanted to raise more taxes on certain commodities in order to pay off the IMF and bank loans. Now, seeing that the people are aware of what is going on, the United States politicians came out to deflect this anger directed towards their parasitic institutions, which is the IMF and World Bank. In the article, they claimed that the debt is because of China, which is, as we have shown here, factually untrue. It is factually untrue. But because they have bigger media platforms on which they spread this misinformation, they have been most of the times successful, and they have succeeded in this treachery. But we believe that with the emergence of alternative African media platforms like Connect Africa, this will not be for so long. It will not go on for so long because we Africans are awake. Now, to put it simply, Kenya's external debt, as we have said, is at $45.5 billion. And China owns a mere 17% of that debt. This means that the United States and its allies like France, Britain, and their institutions, the institutions which they control, the IMF and World Bank, and other institutions, they own 73% of Kenya's external debt. Now, Western countries, led by the United States, will continue to go to all lengths to maintain the exploitative and parasitic relationship which they have with Africa. For us, we believe that nothing but resistance in African countries will change this. Nothing but resistance. Resistance against the Western countries means resistance and overthrowing of their puppet regimes through whom these colonial policies are implemented. Kenya's example is clearly one of those means which must be carefully studied and expanded across the African continent in order to overthrow these parasitic institutions and enterprise. Thank you very much. Mahlet, back to you.
That was really, really interesting. I'm sure it has shocked our audience as it has done to me. Wow, we are, it just tells you a lot has to be done, but also it tells that it's a cliche, but again, it's true. The biggest was it the guy from South Africa, this hero. He's this Pan African guy. Oh my God, he's like my uncle in the back of my head. Now I forgot his name. Who said the biggest weapon for the oppressor is the
Yeah,
mind of
it's Steve Biko. Steve
Steve
Biko.
Biko. I have even his book, but yeah, Steve Biko. So that's it, because they are so sure that we do not read. That's why they come and tell you. Otherwise, everything is out there. Now, in fact, from the middle of this article, I'm going to read just one line. Most of Kenya's debt is held by international bondholders, with China being the largest bilateral creditor. This and that, it continues. So,
So you see what they use there? They want to mislead people. They
yeah.
say China being the biggest bilateral creditor. Now, the Western world, they lend through their institutions, all right? The countries don't come directly and give you money like the United States as a country, but they use the institutions like the IMF, and they use others which they, like hedge funds. The hedge funds can come together and give you a loan. Now, so they want to use that to make it look in the article to make it look like China is the biggest lender. Now, what they are used, what I mean is that China is the biggest holder of the debt, of the total debt of the country. So what they are saying is that China is the biggest bilateral creditor. It is different. That statement is different from being the biggest, holder of the country's debt. But they want to use that and then latch onto that and pound out false narrative that is China's debt is the one which is killing the country. But when it actually China's hold of the debt, the total debt is just 17%. But it's just because China's debt, it is much more productive when it comes to the country. It produces tangible things which you can see. The Western debt, which is, for example, for Kenya, 73%. When you go to Kenya, you don't see what that debt has produced in Kenya,
Mhm.
but poverty, hunger, and suffering. So this is the difference, and these are the tactics which we want our people to look out for them to understand how neo-colonialism works.
Yeah. I wish what is really a burning question for me is that why do we continue to doing this to ourselves? But before that question, I want to ask you, so if this is what it is now, as you have unfolded it, then why is, let's understand it, understanding is really the best thing for everything. So why the west continues to do this? Why?
Yeah. So for the West, first of all, we have to go back, to history for us to understand why the West continues to do this. And this is why it is very important to understand history, because history is the best predictor of the behavior of the future. Okay, if you know someone, then you know what they're going to do in the future. Okay, and so it is very important for the African people and the African children and the African youth and everyone, the African women, the African men, to study history and understand what was originally our relationship with the Western world. How did it look like? Or how has our relationship grown since the last 600 years, or ever since we came into contact, ever since the Europeans came into contact with the Africans, or the Africans came into contact with the West. This is very important. Now, when you examine their behavior in all this period for the last 600 years, how they behaved towards us, then you will know what they're going to do next. You will know what drives them, because that doesn't change. People don't really change. It is only the tools which they use which change. But they themselves, they really don't change, regardless of how it is. it is like culture. Like Africans have their culture, which has been going on for millennia, thousands and thousands of years. These cultures don't change. Our, you know, being hospitable people, that we welcome people, doesn't change, which of course at one point became a problem for us, that we welcomed the wrong people who then enslaved our people and colonized and came and destroyed a lot of our things and stole them and sent them out. And of course, some of them artifacts which we have seen that they are just bringing back right now, with sometimes with begging, and sometimes with roughly. We have to talk roughly for them to bring back these things. We have to shame them in order for them to bring them back. Now, when they came here, you have to ask, what were they looking for in the first place? In the first place, what they were looking for was to grow Europe. Okay, and this has been documented all over. Where even if, when you read Walter Rodney's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, if you read Nkrumah's book, Africa Must Unite, these things have been documented. Or if you go back and read Dr. Henry Clark, even if you listen to Dr. Henry Clark, YouTube videos are there. They came and they wanted to develop Europe. And so they were looking for labor. They were looking for the factors of production, labor, capital, all right? They wanted to accumulate capital. And then they were looking for land. That is why you see that when they left Europe, they went to the United States and killed all the people and took over that land. They went to Australia and killed all the people and took over that land. They went to Canada and killed all the people and took over that land. All right. So they were looking for land, labor, and capital. They wanted to accumulate capital. Now, of course, they got the labor from Africa, which helped them to accumulate the capital using the land which they took from the natives of the United States, and the South Americans, the natives in Canada, the natives in Australia. All right. So that was the purpose. Now, later on, when we fought against slavery and defeated it, of course, contrary to what they tell you, that the Europeans, or I don't know whether it was John Speake or whatever it is, that they stopped slavery, it was Africans who stopped the slavery. And it is after they defeated France, defeated Britain, and they defeated Spain. And those are the Africans in Haiti. Those are the ones who led to the defeat and stopping of slavery. So it is until they defeated France, Spain, and England, that is when slavery was stopped. Okay, so it is the Africans. Now, when slavery was defeated, and of course it would continue on for about 100 more years in the United States. But when it was defeated officially, as a form of business, when slavery was defeated, then they transferred to colonialism. Now, in colonialism, they had accumulated capital, and that is why you saw that Britain entered the phase of industrialization in what they call the first industrial revolution. That is when Britain became very powerful. All right. So I'm showing you this because it is important to trace. I want to trace this question which you have put before me through history, because we cannot just understand it today, why the West continues this behavior. We have to understand how they behaved in the past before we can reach, the real answer to why they are behaving the way they are, why they want to continue to enslave Africa with date, why they are using propaganda, why they are using misinformation. All right. Now, when we came to colonialism, Britain, of course, had entered and accumulated enough capital. If you remember, Britain had almost engulfed the whole world. It controlled, a big chunk of the world, and it accumulated capital, from slavery, originally from slavery, and then from taking over other territories like Australia, India, because it is after slavery was defeated that they went to take over India. They had enough money. Now, the next thing was for them to use the cheap labor, India's cheap labor, and cheap labor from other colonies in Africa, to be able to do what? To power their industry. Now, the colonies became a source of raw material. All right. That is why one of the things that led to the American independence was because the United States was being used by Britain as a source of raw material. What was that raw material? It was sugar. They would take sugar to Britain and repackage it, like what they do to Africa today. They repackage that sugar they would repackage the sugar in Britain and bring it back and sell it to the United States, because the United States that period was a colony of Britain. It is actually Britain which founded the United States. All right. Now these colonies, including Africa and India, they became a source of raw materials, but at the same time they were markets. All right, they were markets at the same time. They were source of raw materials for their industry, because Britain had entered the first industrial revolution, the so-called first industrial revolution. But the products which were being produced in Britain were, supposed to be sold somewhere. So they needed markets. So India, Africa, and all the others became markets. And of course, the United States in 1776 would rebel against its mother. It's like a child rebelling against its mother. It rebelled against Britain and it beat them, and they lost. So the United States became a nation, became a colony. But of course, the United States, after it became a country, major, of course, led by these guys who were British, Scottish, and stuff like that. That is why the United States mostly uses English. The child also started behaving like the mother, and that's what we are seeing today. It also became a colonizer, but its colonialism became covert colonialism, and that is what we are experiencing today. That is why it is the one which leads the other colonial countries, because the colonial countries have been rising and falling slowly. France on top, at one time Italy was the one on top with the Roman Empire, and we had Greece. Okay, we had like I said, we had Rome, which is Italy. We had France. We had Portugal. We had Spain at one time. All these guys. All right. I don't want to expand this conversation very much, but what I want to bring out is that colonialism, brought to fore, the upgrade or the modification in how the interests of the colonial countries were being implemented. At first we wanted labor. Now we are going to use your materials, all right, and your cheap labor, and then we are going to use you as markets for the products which we are producing with our industries. So that was it. Now, when it came to the defeat of colonialism, which people like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah successfully defeated, led the defeat with the help, of course, of the African diaspora, because the African diaspora for a very long time on this continent and in the diaspora, they are the ones who led this struggle of having Africans free, because they were constantly fighting, of course, starting with Haiti, which I've already mentioned. And the agitation continued with people like Marcus Garvey and others, who continued to agitate until the struggle came to Africa and Africa became free. Now, when Africa became free, they sought to maintain Africa in a certain position whereby this system of colonialism would be modified and presented to us as help. They are coming to help. Just like slavery, they said the reason why they are coming to Africa, the reason why they are, they are enslaving us, because they are trying to civilize us. That is why you see that some of the Africans even sometimes say that, oh, slavery was good for Africans because it helped us to become civilized, which is not true, because we had civilizations long before the Europeans came here. So they sought, after independence was achieved, countries like France, they sought to maintain that system of domination and continuing to look at Africa as a source of raw materials. And the purpose of all this since slavery was to continue to build Europe, to maintain Europe at the top. All right. And Africa to be used to build a source of energy and labor and material and everything there is to continue to hold Europe up, for Africa to be down and holding these powers at the top, while they enjoy, you are burdened. All the burden was supposed to be put on Africa, and then they will stand on top of you, and you carry them while they are at the top, dancing and enjoying and eating everything. That is why you see that they have electricity everywhere in their countries. Countries like Niger, until recently, when they came to fight against this foolishness, they don't have electricity in Niger. 90% of the people, almost 95% of the people in Niger don't have electricity. But the uranium, in Niger is used to enrich and power and provide electricity in all the cities in France. So this was the relationship. This is what they sought to achieve. So after 1945, when countries started agitating, India had gotten its independence, a new relationship had to be brought about. Now, because this was the emergence of the United States, it emerged as the most powerful country after World War II. Then it sought to emulate its mother, who is England, uh, to do the same thing which she was doing, because they understood that we cannot continue to be powerful unless we have some form of colonialism which we are perpetuating and taking other people's resources to enrich ourselves. So then those institutions like the IMF and International Monetary Fund, which is the subject of today, of date, how it came about. So those institutions, they sat together without Africa. Africa was not present. China was not present, and all the other countries were not present. It is only the colonial countries and the exploitative countries who sat at the table, and they formed what they called the Bretton Woods institutions. And these institutions were to serve the continuation of what they originally came in Africa to do, which is the continuation of the exploitation of the so-called colonized countries or the poor countries. And so this is going on up to today. Now, in 1960, Nkrumah came about to try to warn us about this phenomenon, and he explained it very well in his book Neocolonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism, and of course warned the African heads of state. This book was published in 1965, but Nkrumah had started seeing this trend unfolding because of the behavior of the United States in Latin America and South America, how it had treated those countries like Cuba, which got its independence in 1905, I think. So when Cuba got its independence, the United States immediately jumped in to say that it was protecting Cuba from Spain, and then took over the country and started treating it like a colony. And then all the other South American countries, all the way to the south, were treated like banana republics, and this is where the word banana republic came from, because the United States took them over. It was like a farm for the United States. So Nkrumah had seen these trends in history and started warning the African heads of state that this is what the United States is going to do to us if we don't unify the African continent. But of course, unfortunately, the African heads of state did not listen to him. And so he continued to publish, Nkrumah continued to publish the works of warning the African heads of state. And that's where he published in 1965 Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, which of course the West did not see very well when the book was published. And that book, I highlighted it in my monologue simply because I want every African to read that book. That book is very important because when it was published, the West immediately banned the book, and they protested against Nkrumah. They protested against Ghana because Nkrumah was still a president when he published that book. Now, the book was warning us that they are coming to colonize us with debt. They are going to use the International Monetary Fund. They are going to use the World Bank. They are going to use their media to, all the things you are seeing. They are going to use Hollywood. If you read the chapter on the mechanism of neocolonialism, Nkrumah mentions even Hollywood. He mentions the United States media platforms and all the mainstream that are going to be used to continue to colonize us as Africans. And of course, to paint Africa as a dark place, as a bad place. And as you have seen that they are saying that we have so much debt. Africa has so much debt. But the reality is saying a different thing. So it is just the process of continuing to benefit, to grow fat, to live, in heaven while we live in hell. So that's the purpose of this behavior of these countries, and of course, led by the United States, to answer your question, why do they want to continue this? Why? What is the interest? Why are they interested in continuing doing this? What they are doing, to spread misinformation and to dominate us, is because they want to maintain themselves at the top of the world. I mean, I might have taken it, further in history, but it's because I wanted people to understand how we reached where we are briefly. So I've gone through 600 years of history until now, just for people to be able to understand what we are trying to explain and talk about. So it is very important that you read history and you understand history, because history is what brought us where we are today. So I want to encourage everyone who's watching, we want to see the number of people who are watching is the same number of likes, and we want to ask you to share this educative program with other people so that they can come and be part of this channel. It is very, very important. Invite at least one person. Each of you invite one person. That would be very, very important. It would make our work easier, and it would make you be part of this journey of conscientizing our people so that the people can understand that we are supposed to be liberated. But it will also make the work of the revolutionaries easier if people are conscientized. Thank you so much, Mahlet.
Thank you very much, Kwame, indeed, for that, taking us back in history. But if there is one thing that we are known as in this platform, at this platform, is that the way we analyze things, we give a historical background and we come to presently what's happening. And then we kind of give you a prediction what is going to happen. So based on history and what's happening at the moment. Now, Kwame, before I move to my second question, so if you can just summarize it, so relating it to now the debts of the African countries and with that historical background. So the question is why they do continue doing this. So now this debt, immersing countries into debt, will enable them what? Like just, to get a highlight out of
Uh, can you come again on that question?
it. So to relate it to the question, now you gave us this historical background. So now immersing African countries into this so much debt and forcing them, so we'll do for them what, like to continue neocolonialism.
Yeah,
Just
the purpose is to continue to suck out everything, every benefit. Now I'll give you an example. um when the United States become
contemporary.
when the United States became the sole power uh in 1989, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it started dominating and doing whatever it wants. And then, of course, that is when they started publishing books like The End of History. Because in The End of History, Francis Fukuyama, who's a political scientist out of neoliberal political scientist out of the United States, claimed to say that the United States has won. So the Western system, of course, that of Britain, whatever, Europe, and the United States and Australia and Canada, the white people, their system would never again be disputed. All right, it would never again be challenged, so they were going to take over. So this gave them the space to do whatever they want with this kind of narrative which was created, what they called the end of history. So they went ahead to do whatever they want in the world, to treat everyone how they want in the world. And so it is these periods which we are called the period of economic hitmen. So the IMF became dominant. The World Bank became dominant. What they say is what you do. So it meant that the liberation movements, all of them were suppressed. All right. Of course, with the label of communism, they are fighting communism, even in Africa. So all the liberation movements were destroyed, including the Black Panther, in the United States, who had risen up to fight for the rights. The Black Panther Party was dismantled. So Malcolm X was killed, Dr. King was killed, Nkrumah was overthrown, Sekou was overthrown. So everyone who had any ideas of challenging this Western system, or anyone who wanted to do anything different from what the Western system wanted, was removed or killed. All right. So people like Walter Rodney, you see them, they are killed. Che Guevara, all of them. It's only a few of them who survived, who were very strong, or who had some help, or who had built up some level of institutional protection. All right. So these are the ones who survived. Now, the United States from then on went on to do whatever it wanted. So humiliating people, this is what went on. But all this is meant to help them to stay on top by consuming the resources of other people. All right. So I said this was the period of economic hitmen. If you read John Perkins' book, it is this very period. It was during this period that they would go out. They were the sole builders of anything. If you want an airport, they are the ones who choose whether to build or not. And that airport, if they were to build it, or a road, then it had to be in exchange of resources. All right, they have to come and identify whatever they want in your country, and then come and put one small airport there. And the money doesn't come that you are going to build it with your own institutions. They came with their institutions. So the things which they are accusing actually China today, they were doing it a thousand times worse. They are doing that a thousand times worse than that, what they are accusing China today. So that is what happened. So, and what is this supposed to be for? It is supposed to be for the sucking out of wealth from your country. So your country is supposed to be a generator of wealth. And when the wealth is accumulated, then they come and harvest that wealth and take it to their country. So that is the purpose. So they were supposed to be treated like businesses, just like how you see the East India Company during colonialism owned India. The I think there is another one which is called the East African Company, and then there is another one which was called the West African Company. So they owned Nigeria. Another one owned East Africa, British East Africa. So these companies ran these countries, these territories, as businesses, as farms. So that process, they wanted to continue. And they made huge profit during that period of East India Company, because I think they said that the British harvested up to, I don't know what, maybe $4 trillion out of India, something like that. They destroyed India's economy. Actually, they found it was one of the best and biggest economies in the world, both of them, China and India. But they destroyed India's economy completely, and they extracted almost up to $4 trillion, out of the country. So that, for them, they think that it has to continue. That is the only way they are going to survive. And of course, that is why it is problematic to look at our leaders in our African countries, our heads of state, playing around with these people and joking with these people, because these people are capable of so much dangerous things. They are so much capable of, of the unimaginable, the most unimaginable evil that you can think of, like genocide and removing completely people from their lands and taking away their country. This is what these people are capable of. So it is very difficult to watch our heads of state, playing around with these people, and then thinking that this is a classical argument of privatization and public ownership, when we know through history this has not been the argument. It has been outright use of the state force and power to take over countries and territories. Like Britain used its force to take over, to come and colonize, for example, countries in Africa. It used its force, its military force, to go over there to China and take over and colonize China, and even take Hong Kong. It was not private, business which was doing that. it is used the same thing to take over Australia, take over the United States. So today, I think that we have that problem that the African heads of state think that is an argument, a classical argument of so-called privatization and public ownership, which is not, the case. And of course, you may say they have been brainwashed, all right? And of course, there's a book dedicated to this, which was written by one African or African American in the United States, which is called The Miseducation of the Negro, which is very important, that I would recommend people to read on and understand what is going on. But that is the reason. Just to briefly understand, again, respond to your question. The reason is to continue to harvest out the wealth which is created in our countries, and then of course, starting the year 2000, China became very powerful. It was growing rapidly, and it became the major creditor. All right. See, becoming a major creditor, like we said, is different from being the major owner of your debt. So China became a major creditor to Africa starting 2000 and the global south. And then Africa started growing rapidly. So if you notice the data from 2000 is when Africa started growing rapidly, and other countries of the global south. That is where the major 10 fastest growing economies in the world came from the global south, including African countries. It had about 7 countries in there. So that growth is what the United States now is targeting to harvest out. Like I said, it is trying to harvest the growth that has happened since 2000. Is trying to harvest it from Africa. And what does it want to use? It wants to use the IMF and the World Bank, and then it wants to demonize the people who have helped Africa to accumulate that growth, who are the Chinese, because the growth has happened because of the growth that happened in China. And we somewhat have been getting infrastructure, a lot of infrastructure from China, which has been built here. And that infrastructure has helped Africa to grow. And of course, with the sale of our commodities also, which are our raw materials, at a much reasonable price compared to the West, because the West used to come and take over everything. They will not even give us anything. But China gives us better deals, you know, and then of course it also develops. So the United States is trying to come back to Africa. That is why you hear everywhere right now, IMF, World Bank. IMF is taking over in Ghana. IMF is taking over in South Africa. IMF in Egypt. IMF everywhere in Kenya. IMF. But in starting 2000, you did not hear very much of it. And everyone was saying that African heads of state had turned to China for lending. So this is what is happening, that the West now is trying to harvest the growth that has been happening in Africa. And of course, that means that our growth is going to slow down. That's why you see, when you look at figures, you look at countries like Ghana, the growth has slowed down to 2%. Countries which we are growing at 7%. You look at countries like Sierra Leone, which are very, behind and need to grow consistently with 7 to 10%. If you look at our economies like Dambisa Moyo, they say that for a country to double its GDP in a decade, it needs to grow between 7 to 10% every year. But now all these countries have fallen back behind. They are growing at 3%, simply because the IMF has come back to take over these countries. So to sum it up, to conclude it or to summarize it, they are coming back, or they are back here, or they have continued to behave this way because they want to harvest out our wealth. So the more we accumulate, the more they harvest out and they take it. So unless we do something about it, the relationship will continue to move in that direction.
Thank you, Kwame. So that is as far as why the West continues to do, what it is doing, which has a similarity with the history from slavery time to colonialism and now neo-colonialism. The interest, they have been so focused, and it's very clear in black and white their intention. We know how they operate. It's not a dumb people. We have smart people in the continent, who can analyze this. There are platforms, intellectuals, Then, and the leaders might be, I don't know if I can use the word dumb or obedient or whatever, but their advisors must be, uh, somehow, who came from their MPs, their advisors, who knows what we are talking about right now. So why do we continue, we Africans, this or in general, globally, Black people, for this to continue? Why do we allow it? Are we so, what can I say, like powerless? We can't do anything uh, to reverse this, particularly with the debt that has to do with the debt. And then later on, as a last question, you will tell us what is the way forward.
Yeah, so we are not powerless, and that is why I pointed out that uh, Haiti, as a poor country, these people were slaves. All right, they were slaves in 1791, but the slaves who don't have an economy, they don't have any military base, they don't have any businesses, they don't own land, they don't own anything. Uh, were able to organize themselves. They don't have any communication means like they have or social media where they communicate with each other, but they were able to organize themselves and defeat France, Britain, and Spain. Because when they defeated France, Napoleon, and this Napoleon, which they normally praise that he was a powerful general, he was defeated by black people. So he defeated his fellow white people in Europe, but when it came to blacks, he never defeated them. So when they defeated France, they, Britain wanted to take over the colony again. And this, you can find it in the book, which is called The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. It is free on the internet. You can Google it and read it for yourself. So Britain came to want to take over the colony, and Spain, and they had to fight against Britain and Spain and also defeat it. So we are not so much we are powerless. This example shows you that we are not powerless as a people, but of course there is some weaknesses somewhere. We have certain weaknesses somewhere, and those are the ones which, of course, I want to touch on. Uh, we see that uh, we were supposed to consolidate independence, and of course we came through also, and we defeated these colonial countries in the 1960s, but we failed to retain that independence. We failed to consolidate that independence. And of course, this happened both on the African continent when Nkrumah came and brought independence, and all the other African countries came and understood that they're supposed to get independence, and they fought for that independence. We were supposed to consolidate that independence through unification of the African continent. So that unification was the one which was the consolidation process, to say that, okay, consolidation means to hold tight. That's what basically it means. You have gotten something, that means you hold it tight now. So that's the consolidation. Now, when you hold it, then you can be able to use it. So we were supposed to consolidate through unification, and that's why Nkrumah was fighting very hard in the 1960s to see that Africa unifies, because the unification of the continent was going to have effect, a multiplier effect on the affairs of Africans across the world, including the Africans in the United States and the Caribbean. Nkrumah understood this very well. That unification, it is from that is when we were supposed to go to the next phase, which was the rapid reconstruction. But the unification itself was the one which was going to help us to ward off any powerful country. Because remember, as we started, they still had interest in our countries, and which is the extraction of wealth. from these countries through raw materials, using our countries as market for their finished products and extraction of labor, which is still going on today. You can see that some of our smartest people, and an example is Dr. Mensa. There's Dr. Mensa, who was an inventor of fiber optic, who helped actually the internet age to come into being by inventing fiber optic. So Dr. Mensa died recently, but he died in the United States. So you can see that even the extraction of labor also has continued even today. So we were not able to consolidate our independence so that we can prevent these things, attacks like how you see they attacked Libya. The United States in 1993 came and attacked, Somalia. So there's no way we could prevent this if we did not consolidate. So there was a weakness there which emerged that we failed to consolidate. And different African heads of state listened to the colonial powers. They were speaking to them in the ears and they listened. So that is a weakness which emerged. Now, you look at countries like South Africa, for example, instead of after independence being radical, because they had a chance to be radical, to radicalize the country, since the apartheid regime had been weakened. So they were supposed to radicalize, like in South Africa, they were supposed to radicalize and say we have to take back the land. They did not do it. So these are mistakes. They compromised. So now you see that the one who was the enemy now is coming back on top today. So these are the challenges which we experience. But these did not mean these challenges do not mean that they cannot be overcome. Because even the enemy himself or the colonial powers, they are just using this to stay on top, but the control has already eroded from them. From slavery to colonialism, all this has been a process of them losing power. All right, so they are fighting so hard to hold on because they have lost so much. They have already lost so much. So the tactics, they are just inventing new tactics to try to stay afloat. And people like Nkrumah were ahead. They had seen a lot, these tactics. They had foreseen these tactics. But the other heads of state in the continent who had not seen these tactics, did not, follow Nkrumah's advice, or did not follow him with his suggestion, did not take Nkrumah's suggestions and what he was telling them that this is what we should do. And of course, majority of them paid heavily for it. And even to date, we as Africans, we are paying heavily for it. That is why these hidden means of colonialism have continued to this day. All right, but it is not because we are, completely powerless. We are not powerless, because if we were powerless, we would not have defeated colonialism or would not have defeated slavery. All right, so we just have to do much more. People like Dr. Arikana has pointed out recently, when she was still the African Union representative to the United States. She pointed out that it is that the African heads of state are tied. So this is what she was saying, that they want to act, but it is like they are tied. It is because the enemy, whose imperialism, of course led by the United States imperialism and all European countries working together, they use different tactics, fear, blackmail, So blackmail is like they will come to you and they will say, okay, do this, do this. We have this information on you. You must do this for us, which is likely, many people have suggested that this is likely what they are doing to Ruto, that they are blackmailing him, that maybe they have something on him, so they are blackmailing him. Because if you look at the guy, he started very well pushing for Africa's interests on the international stage, and now he all of a sudden made a U-turn. So it is like, and of course we saw United States diplomats frequenting the Kenyan, state house. Okay, they were frequenting state house in Kenya. So it is likely they were blackmailing him to turn what he was following. And Nkrumah, of course, mentioned all these things. So the African heads of state are looking powerless in that way, in the same way which Dr. Arikana said, that they want to do certain things, but it is like they are powerless. They cannot do what they are supposed to do for the African people because somebody is blackmailing them and is always talking in their ear and stuff like that to try to blackmail them so that they can do the bidding of the West. So they are not, we are not powerless as a whole, as a group. If the African heads of state came to the people and explained that this is what is happening, this is what is really happening. And we have seen this happening in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, that when the heads of state come out and explain to their people that this is the real situation, this is what is happening, so that you don't wait for your people to realize that this is this, and the people have to fight for themselves. But if you come out as the head of state and you explain to the people that this is the situation that is happening on the ground, this is what this is the pressure we are facing. We need you to be patient so that we can work together, to push the country forward or to push the continent forward. Then we will be able to succeed together. But
Then
with
that's
that being
exactly, I think, a good point to transition to the next. Then, like, the pressure will continue. So, what should be
yes,
done? What is the way forward then?
so of course, before I go to the way forward, of course, I don't want to implicate, completely put, it would be hypocritical and it would be bad analysis for me to put everything, all the blame on, on imperialism and neocolonialism. Of course, we have some bad apples also within the African leadership, just like during 1963 when Nkrumah wanted to unify. There was some heads of state who were selfish, during that period. They were so used to the trappings of power because power comes with luxury because you have control over unlimited resources, right? So these unlimited resources which are at your disposal, they corrupt you, all right? And the imperialists, they like this, of course. They like this very much. Okay, they can tell you that we can keep billions for you in the West, so that when you leave power, you will come and stay in the West. You can see how the West is. There's good roads, there's nice roads, there's airports. And of course, this was the case of people like Mobutu Seseko. You can talk of people like Sani Abacha of Nigeria. So these are the trappings of power. So that also is a problem that has hindered us from moving forward and has held us in the trap of this Western colonialism. So that trapping is the is the same or is one of those that have led us to be inside this trap of the imperialists. So the solution to what you are saying, I think that is for us to organize. One of the tools which have been used, uh, like the ones in Kenya, what they have done, it shows you that these institutions now can be defeated. And now it shows you clearly that power comes from the people. All right. When the people say this must be done, it has to be done. So it is similar to what happened in Kenya. That is a very clear blueprint that could be replicated across the unification of the African continent, across all the African continent, people resisting, and of course, revolutionaries understanding continuously to emphasize within themselves, the revolutionaries or like us, that the power is within the people and we have to mobilize the people to move in this particular direction, and of course to read the signs. That is very important. Dr. Nkosazana, in her last speech, when she was handing over the chairpersonship of the African Union Commission, because she was once the chairperson of the African Union Commission, she said that Africa is a contested space. All right, she said is a contested space. What she meant is that there is powers outside which are contesting for Africa's resources. All right, countries are contesting. They are contending because they want a share of Africa's resources. All right. So this means that the colonialism has not gone away. European colonialism has not gone away. It's just been rebranding, rebranding, and rebranding. And of course, the reason for this rebranding is to continue to what we said, enriching, Europe and the United States and the Western world at the expense of the African continent and the rest of the global south, by taking our resources and speculating on them on the New York Stock Exchange, Wall Street, and the London Stock Exchange, while our people wallow in poverty and they don't even have water to drink, they don't have electricity. So our countries should be used as farms, as gardens, as one of the European Union diplomats say that, our countries are farms, So this can only be counted by what we are doing here is a contribution, definitely conscientizing our people, but also, uh, mobilizing the people towards the political revolution that we need as Africa and its unification, because we cannot escape this trap in Africa without unifying the continent. That one, we will never escape it if we don't unify the continent and build it as a strong unit together. So that is why we constantly call for the unification of Africa and others to support this work that we are doing towards drumming the drums for the unification of the continent. So that is what I see as the solution, as even what Nkrumah said, or how Nkrumah gave it, and all the other ancestors like Marcus Garvey, Walter Rodney, all of them, this is the solution which they gave us. But somewhere along the line, our African heads of state have gone off the track of the solution which was given to us, that we must make Africa great. People like Julius Nyerere themselves, they say that unless Africa unifies, it cannot even start solving its problems. So that is the direction where we are supposed to go, and that is the way forward. So wherever you are, whether you are African descendant or African, whatever it is, African diaspora, whatever you want to call yourself, the work has to be for the unification of the African continent and rebuilding it, and the benefits of that unification will be like a multiplier effect. It will sprinkle, all over the continent where African people are located. Thank you so much, Mahlet.
Thank you so much, Kwame, as usual. Really, yeah, this is where we come and learn, and not only to keep it to ourselves, but where we also have to share. You, as an audience, have to share it with other people. Just a quick thing to show, yeah, the miseducation of the Negro. This is a book, so very, very interesting book. It's something that you have to read, and let your children read, and let your siblings, your anyone that you know, because they don't get it in the academy way, not only in the diaspora, even in Africa. We don't even learn when one government comes, they don't teach us what even the good things of his predecessor or her predecessor has done. So yeah, and Steve Biko, I think this is what we talked about. Uh, yeah, this is of course something not planned, but I can't help but asking you, a very good number of audience. We are happy there are new family members, and but most of them are family. Good to see, really. Thank you very much for being here, for tuning in. Thinking of now where we started is that article being published on 3rd of July, US from all the countries warning Kenya after putting this country into mess, of course, through Ruto. But the nerve that they have got, the courage that they have got, and they are quickly deflecting from one position to the other. Now, they literally have been weeks ago in bed with William Ruto, the US government. Now it's coming and deflecting and warning, they are putting him out of the game, and look at him, they are alienating him and trying to position themselves with the people. Okay, it will affect the social service, health, whatever now all of a sudden they think about the people. But when they send their IMF people, and when they advise him to increase the exchange rate, the inflation, and when they advise him to remove all the basic subsidies to the fuel and to increase the price of bread, the very basic need to the people, they do not think about them. Now they want to, because they want to continue the benefits that they are getting, and probably with the benefits they are getting from Kenya. And my fear is that because these people have proved the West always working with any government that is coming in. That's why we are watching carefully what, for example, Diomaye Faye is doing now in Senegal, because the person that you think, the one, like, for example, let this revolution ended successfully, and the one, Kenyan, what Kenyan wants come, but you might see that person as well trying to please everyone, and you start to doubt, oh, this is a sellout. Then everybody is a sellout for us, okay? And probably as we speak, they are talking in a closed office who they are going to, okay, if the protest is going on, then we have to bring another person who talk like this, use who talk revolution, and still who do our agenda. What is your message for the Kenyan people, really?
Yeah, so
This
I
might
think that the
have been hijacked.
so I think that the Kenyan people have done well. First of all, I think that we have to applaud them. These institutions have to be resisted, but it is very important to look out for guidance from organizations that have been consistent in defending the interest of Kenya and putting them at the top of the revolution in giving guidance to where Kenya should go. All right. And of course, for that matter, Africa, because it is not enough. It is not enough to have the revolution stop in Kenya. This revolution, we need it all across the African continent. And there's organizations like the Communist Party of Kenya, which has really very good leaders who look at things from an African perspective, and they look at the interests of the people. So I think that it is very important for the organizers of these demonstrations to look out for people like that, not only actually in Kenya, but also across the continent, and also to translate this struggle into the struggle for the liberation of the whole continent. Because, like Nkrumah said, that at independence in Ghana, when they were, declaring Ghana's independence in 1957, on March 6th, he said that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. So this has to always be in our mind, that regardless of what we have achieved in these particular countries, in overthrowing imperialism, but that is not it. If we don't link that with the total liberation of the African continent and working with the other Africans in liberating the whole continent, then imperialism will go through out the door and come back through the window, or will go through the front door and then come back through the back door.
Well, let's reminisce on that one. I'm not going to add anything. Thank you very much, Kwame, once again. So we would like to make our participants, our audience here, part of what we are discussing here, is because most of the time question comes, comments, suggestions. We have taken 1 hour and more than 10 minutes, 1 hour and 13 minutes to be exact. We want it also for others to see it when this stream is over. But thanks again. Lion rules the jungle without fear. That's a new family member you have, commented, suggested a lot. Thank you very much. But all the other family members, hail for unrepentant. Mikey Semba, welcome, child of God. Lauren, did I miss someone? I think Marcos Santo. Who else we have here? Kibe, Ciendes. Hi, Ciendes. Ciendes always listen behind silent, but thank you for coming and suggesting, asking. Sheila Thomas, the Juma Booting. Again, yeah. So if I miss anyone, Patricia Cox, I see many of you. I might have missed some people, but it was not, or it is not intentional. Yeah, and thank you. So we will see you again on another program on Saturday. But we always say that, I mean, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday is tri-weekly with Kwame. But we have been here, I think, the whole week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I'm sure tomorrow also
Because
there will
there's
be
so
some.
much going on. There's so much
Yeah,
going on.
so much going on. As we always say, we want to come and own our narrative and, set the record before you are, before the Western media dumps its agenda on you. That's it. Thank you and have a good evening from where I am, and same for Kwame. Thank you. We'll see you again. Please don't forget to share, subscribe, to like it, share the video. And if you want to
Very
help
important.
further, yeah, you can donate to our PayPal account. Thank you very much, Greta Woodson, for your donation. But all of you, anything will help. Ciao, ciao.